One of the highlights of this year's Melbourne Documentary Film Festival is a short film called Ukrainians in Exile. And it's my great pleasure to be speaking to the director of the film, Janek Ambros. Janek, welcome to Movie Metropolis.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on, Peter. I greatly appreciate it.
My pleasure. This is such an intriguing short film about a woman's experience, in particular, of being in exile from Ukraine. How did it all come about?
Well, I mean, really, it was it started, it was Russia invaded Ukraine, and then just I think having kind of a lot of connection to that part of the world and being Polish and that kind of thing, and you know, having had historical family lineage of dealing with Russian aggression, I just felt kind of like a camaraderie or kinship to what was going on. And I felt kind of helpless and sitting in Los Angeles. So I just really went there, a couple weeks, as soon as it happened, really that same week, I got a flight to go to Warsaw. And then I took a bus or train to Przemyśl, which was the city in which a small border town where a lot of the Ukrainians were fleeing from Ukraine into Poland. So I really just went to go help with refugees, and I also was a little bit of a part of this organization that would bring in trucks of deliveries of anything from tourniquets or medical equipment to the front lines. So I would kind of help them set up the trucks that would then go, through the border into Kyiv, which uh, at one point I remember Putin was very aware of what was going on, where the Russian, the Kremlin, that there were funneling stuff in through NATO essentially, because Poland's NATO. So that was pretty intense. But as a filmmaker, I brought my camera, and I was really inspired by some of the World War II documentaries that were shot by William Wyler, and a lot of the Why We Fight campaign. And William Wyler just was very like, just shooting what he saw. And obviously, I didn't see any combat. I was just seeing refugees. So I just wanted to shoot what I saw, because I was there and I brought a camera, no audio equipment, and that's kind of how it started.
Oh wow, what an interesting background and process. So tell me how easy it was to do the film, to shoot what we see, and to have the woman, I think it's Ania, is it, who narrates?
Anya, yeah.
Anya, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so the interesting thing is, like I said, like I was just shooting what I saw, so I didn't, and maybe this makes me probably does make me a bad documentary filmmaker, but because I'm mostly a narrative filmmaker, but I didn't want to ask any questions to anybody there. I felt they were dealing with so much, and there was so much news coverage on it, that I just, what am I going to say? How do you feel right now?
Mm.
It's obviously not great. They're dealing with a lot of things. They have to deal with logistics of where they're going to go. Are they going to go to Poland? Are they going to go to Germany then after? Is their husband, or in some cases, grandfathers and uncles and these kind of things fighting, because a lot of the Ukrainian people fighting are not just your typical kind of American, 18 to 25 soldiers. I mean, we're dealing with a pretty big span. So I didn't want to bother any of them. I just felt it was in poor taste, and I just didn't make me feel comfortable. And so it's not just out of a kind of an altruistic thing. I just didn't want to ask them. I just wanted to, talk to them and hang out. So that made it very visual. It was just a very visual film, which kind of just helped me kind of be visual about it. And so after I came back to America, I compiled the footage. I said, what am I going to really do with this? It can't just be music and footage. And so, I kind of thought, well, that would be, I don't think I've ever seen anything, at least about a person who's in a country while their fellow country people are fleeing, but that said person is staying behind. So I wanted to speak to somebody in Ukraine who didn't flee for whatever reason. There's a whole host of reasons why many people have to stay or whatever. And Anya didn't leave, so I said, well, how are you feeling? And especially in terms of how are you feeling about how you hope other people treat your fellow country people that have left. And that's what it was really about. So she is basically saying in the short that I hope people are warm and kind to the refugees. And that's kind of the point of the film, I think, is, and I'm not afraid to say that this is very much a message movie, or even what one might even say propaganda, but the propaganda is to say help these refugees. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Like that's my point. I'm not being like, well, it's complicated. It's not complicated. I mean, the history of the world is of course complicated, but this particular instance to me is not complicated. Russia invaded Ukraine. There's a lot of innocent Ukrainians fleeing, and the hope is that people are very welcoming to them because they're refugees. And that's what I wanted to just stick with that, kind of going back to almost those William Wyler and the Why We Fight campaign films that were not trying to be ambiguous and artsy. I mean, I can go and make art. I make art films all the time, but this wasn't that. I wanted to kind of keep this pretty focused. So that's how Anya got involved, was to kind of be the person to say, hey, I'm still in Ukraine. What's happening is horrible. I hope the people out there are treating my fellow country people who are fleeing right now because they have to well. And that was the point.
Okay, very good. It's such an informative short film. Uh, some of the shots you have in the film are excellent and tell us so much about what's happening in Ukraine. What was the editing process like? Because it was a pretty tight 6 minute film.
Yeah, I mean, I had hours and hours of footage, and I think there was, a few people and even voices in my head saying, "Well, why don't you make this a longer film and have it be a real documentary?" But once again, going back to those Why We Fight campaign videos, is that I wanted to make it a useful film. I make so many narrative films that are for entertainment and for artistic expression, where this was not that. This was not any kind of, oh, I need to get something out of my personal self, or this is to entertain people. This is a very direct message to say, help these refugees. So my whole filmmaking process changed into saying, well, why don't I try to make this 6 minutes? Because that way it's just enough time where it can go on Twitter, Instagram, social media, to have, maybe, I mean, not maybe, now millions of people seeing it, and maybe tie it to a charity to help the refugees. So I mean, if I made it 15 minutes or 30 minutes or an hour, some film festivals would see it, but that's not enough if you're trying to make, a material difference in raising money or bringing awareness. That's more for an amazing set of people who to come to gather around and share each other's art and documentaries and shed light on issues. But I felt bringing it shorter was actually probably the smartest way to get it more of a social impact of social media, and it proved to be true. I mean, that's kind of what we helped. Liev Schreiber is an executive producer on the film, a great actor, and we raised a lot of money for them, and because we had a lot of celebrities, retweeted and shared on social media. And I wouldn't be able to do that if it was 20 minutes or 30 minutes. No one's going to sit on their cell phone and watch something for more than 5 minutes. So I kept it really tight.
Hmm.
And that was hard because I had hours and hours of footage. And yeah, but I think it proved to be the right choice because I think it helped the Blue Check Ukraine organization. I think that's the most important thing.
Yes, yes. No, I understand. That's very good. You've mentioned Liev Schreiber and also Janusz Kaminski is an executive producer. That's great having those people on board to really further your film.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, and I know, yeah, I know. I mean, be totally honest. It's like when I was shooting it, I very much, I'm a big fan of Steven Spielberg and Janusz Kaminski. I mean, who isn't, right? But there's something about the way that Janusz Kaminski shoots his films, Saving Private Ryan, Schindler's List, that is I kind of had in my head, and not to make it any more dramatic than it needed to be, because that would be contrary to what I was saying about not making it artistic. But I think there's something to be said about portraying the truth does require some finesse, and you don't want to just shoot. So I would even listen to a lot of of the music of some of Spielberg's films, and I just reached out to Janusz Kaminski and I showed it to him and I said, can you put your name on it? I'm sure it might help a little bit. And he said, absolutely, a wonderful person. I was even thankful enough to talk to Steven Spielberg about the film and when he was doing the Fablemans. So, those guys are really big, heroes, to be quite frank, of mine in my artistic career. But I also think they've done a lot of work shedding light on issues through narrative film, you know. And so they're just big inspirations for me, not just on an artistic level, but some of the subject matter they tackle. So that was meant a lot to me personally, but it also helped the overall mission of the film too.
Yes, yes. Well, it's been seen so widely, apart from obviously the Melbourne Documentary Film Festival. It's had huge coverage, I've noticed. So your message has got out, or your film is certainly available to lots of people.
Yeah, there was a lot of celebrities who were really cool about it. I reached out to a lot of people who spoke up about it when the war happened and said, "Hey, listen, I remember you doing this back then, but now it's 2 years later, and if anything, it's more important that people come to help now because those first 6 months, everybody was Slava Ukraine, but over time, it doesn't have the same, the news cycle these days. It's just like 5 minutes later, something else. So I held the film on purpose for a couple of years because I knew that these organizations would need more help in 2 years rather than have it ready be the first 6 months because everybody was willing to help in some capacity and there was just money flying all over the place in terms of organizations. But I knew in 2 years that this would be an unpopular, I mean, the at least in our country and in America, half the country, is very anti-Ukraine, to put it mildly, and anti-Zelensky. So I figured it would be better to hold on to it. And yeah, and so a lot of celebrities like Lucy Liu, Edward Norton, Patton Oswalt, Peter Gabriel, against me. I can go on and on. And they shared the film. Like I kind of go back to the idea of it being 5, 6 minutes, made it easier to say, well, share it. And that's why it accumulated, so many views and I think it's even better though when it plays at a place like in Melbourne as a documentary film festival because it's not on your phone. It makes you really take it in a little bit more. So that's what makes it the festival is also so valuable in a different way. It
Yeah.
might not be as many people, but there's more. You're watching it in a movie theater. You're really forced to sit there and deal with it like any other time you watch a movie in the theater. So there's different ways I think of getting films out there, and that's why I'm so excited to play it in Melbourne, which we haven't done the film screening in Australia yet, which so makes me excited.
Oh, excellent to hear all that. That's yes, and it will have an impact, I know, on audiences here as well. Um, Yannick, I'm quite intrigued. Tell me about some of the other films you've made and your approach to those films.
Yeah, sure. The first feature I did, or yeah, the first feature I did was a movie called Imminent Threat, and that was a documentary as well. So these are I don't make many documentaries anymore, but these are the two, and it was about the war on terror and its impact on civil liberties in America. So it got into the war in Iraq and how the this was kind of the more like this was 2015, so I was this is I was 24 years old when I made this feature, so I'm a little bit always weird to watch it, but I we basically it was about how the war on terror's impact on civil rights, civil liberties, the security state. It's so weird thinking about it now because now I feel like we've just kind of accepted it all, which is a strange but then there was a little bit of a fight of hey, well, should they be collecting all this metadata on that? Is that a breach of the Fourth Amendment and so on? So that was my first feature, but I'm a narrative film person. I mean, so what a lot of the other films, one of the other films I've directed was a movie called Mondo Hollywoodland, which is a political satire, very like inspired like Robert Altman, and it's about this mushrooms dealer who sells drugs to various groups of people in LA, and we start following all their stories. But it's a very politically satirical movie too. Like most of my movies have some sort of political potency underneath the comedy or whatever genre it is. And then I'm also a producer. I have my own company, so I direct the movies under my company, Assembly Line Entertainment. but we also produce movies that I don't direct. So we had a movie at Sundance that won Sundance 2 years or last year called In the Summers. And now my next film is a movie about a financial uh, wealth management advisor who's a degenerate and has 48 hours to come up with $500,000 before his client finds out he stole it. So a little bit more in the non-political, though it always has something to say. I think every movie's political, but a little bit more in the what I want to do, which is maybe a little bit less in your face political, a little bit more character driven stuff is now kind of my main focus, and including a lot of the what I mostly do is write screenplays. So a lot of the screenplays I write are biopics. Those are sometimes very political because they're historical biopics. We wrote a movie about General MacArthur and Dean Acheson when World War III almost started during the Korean War. So I'm very interested in history and war. So yeah, so I'm working on a whole slate of stuff, and but this is definitely one of the more rewarding films I've been a part of, just because, it actually has some utility in helping people rather than just entertaining.
Well, congratulations on all that, Janek. It's a really terrific short film, and interesting to hear your work with other films that you've been making and that you're about to make as well. So it's been great talking to you. We've been speaking to Janek Ambros, who is the director of Ukrainians in Exile, now part of the Melbourne Documentary Film Festival. Janek, thank you so much for talking with me.
Thank you so much. And if anybody wants to kind of check out my films and my company's films, you can follow us at Assembly Line Entertainment on Instagram. And if you do watch Ukrainians in Exile or any of my other films, feel free to rate them on Letterboxd, which is becoming a very popular new social media outlet to rate movies. So, Peter, thank you so much for having me on. It really does mean a lot.
No problem at all. All the best. Bye bye.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.